These are Hazard compressed powder cartridges for 36 and 44 caliber cap and ball revolvers. Now these would have been made by the Hazard Powder Company and used during the Civil War. And if you're interested in making some of these, you can go to Cross and Cartridge and pick up the molds that he sells to make 36, 44, and 58 caliber Hazard compressed powder cartridges. Now, a few months back, Mark Hubbs from Era's Gone Bullet Molds did a video on these, and as soon as I saw him, I thought, man, I have got to give these a try. These look really interesting. So I ordered up the 36 and the 44 cal mold. Now, the footage I'm going to show you here are my first two attempts. Now, the first one was pretty much a colossal failure, which was entirely my fault, which I'll explain in a minute. But the second one, I did change a little bit. Now, I'll show you the math that John recommends here for the level of dextrin and water. I run pretty much the same ratio, but I just up the powder charge a little bit. For example, the 36 cal cartridges, I run 18 grains of powder, and the 44 cal cartridges, I run 25 grains of powder. I'm also using homemade 4F, which is not glazed, which might change things just a little bit, but consider yourself warned. All right. So when you buy the kit, it comes with the dextrin, it comes with these tools here, and these are 36s, but I also bought the 44s, and all of this applies just the same, only the math is a little different because you use more powder. These here, John says, are 17 grains. I run 18 just for easy figuring. So what I do is I pour out 106 grains of powder, and then I grab my dextrin here, a little too much, but trust me, that'll be fine. We're looking for 3, but 3.7 is close enough. Then you mix it up with this here, and you want to get all that incorporated, and you don't want to have any white chunkies. You don't want to have any big white chunks in there. So I'm just stirring it around gently. I'm not smashing it. I'm not trying to grind it to get it any finer. And that is what you're shooting for there. Still is a little bit of white specks, but it's this stuff here that you want to try and avoid. So after we got that, I'm going to zero it out again. Now, in the kit, he gives you these things here. I prefer a spray bottle, and this is just water with an itty bit, like 2 drops of alcohol in it. And so I'll zero it out. I'll give it one little spray, and I'll stir it around a little bit, just to try and make sure we get it in there as best as we can. You don't want to hose it. You don't want to get it sopping wet. You don't want it to turn into paste. And again, we're looking for about 3 grains of water. .8, close enough for me. So again, we just stir that in there. You don't want to smash it. You're not looking to make a paste. You just want it to be barely damp. You want it looking pretty much just like that. Now, then put your funnel on there like that. Put it on our scale, and we'll zero it out again. Now, the way I like to do this, I found this works out pretty well, is I just pour some in till about maybe between 8 or 10 grains, 9.6. Take your plunger, and I just start pushing it down in there. You don't really need to slam it, just get it started. I find it's a little easier to do that than to put all of it in there. 18 grains. Again, I use my plunger, get it seated in there. You don't need to hammer it, get it down there. It looks like that's a little farther down. You take your plunger part here and push it in there and then compress it. Now, I could push it against my table here with my hand and compress it. But if you want to use a vise or use your load and press or whatever, but you got to get that compressed. You can pop that out, and then there you are. And so I just set that up here, and I'll do the rest of them and leave them, and we'll go from there. All right, so we got our last one compressed, used every bit of powder, so that worked out well. There's the last one. So now what I do is I'll take my screwdriver and I'll just start taking these apart, and again, keeping them over left to right, the one I did first. Now the reason why I like doing it this way, if you play your cards right, you don't have to let them sit in the mold for 24 hours because that really slows things down. So I found that if you do it this way, and again, you don't mess it up, you can get away with making a bunch of these at one time, like you see over here. So after they're all apart, what I do is I gently move the mold back and forth till it comes out like that, and then I just let it sit there for a few minutes. And I'll take all these apart and I'll just let them sit for a few. Maybe 5 or 10 minutes is really all it takes. And after they're apart and they dry a little bit and they're already pressed and formed, we'll be able to pull them out of there without breaking them and without having to let them sit in the mold for 24 hours. Again, if you play your cards right. So we'll just let these sit for, between 4 or 5 minutes, and I do have my ceiling fan on high just to get a little air moving across them. So we'll come back in a few minutes and we'll pop these out of here, and then we'll make another one and keep going. All right, so let's see if I could show you this without it being too much trouble, if it'll focus. So what I found that you could do is give it a little bit of a, if you could see, kind of a back and forth motion like that. And you can pop them out of there like that. And then they don't have to sit in the mold for 24 hours. So there we have all 6 of them came out, and now you could move on and put it all back together and make more of them. So you could make a whole bunch of them like you have over here in one sitting, as opposed to having them sit in here for 24 hours, because again, that's a bummer. So after I've made up all these right here, and I'll admit I did not do all of these in one day. I did these one day and then I did the other ones. So we got 6 times 8, 48 of them. So all these ones I did over the last hour and a half or so. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put these in the oven. I know that might sound scary, but trust me, it'll be okay. And we're going to put them in the oven at 130 degrees for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, just to make sure that there is no moisture left in these things. Boy, this thing is just not going to focus, huh? Sorry about all that. Because when we coat them with our nitrocellulose lacquer, we don't want to seal in any moisture. So we'll just roast them, bake them gently to make sure that there is no moisture in there left at all. So that's what we're going to do next. Now, if you're wondering about, the powder out here, they do flake a little bit, but mostly what it is, again, if it'll focus, sorry. The ridge, if you can see it, which, well, you're just not going to cooperate, are you? This ridge here, a lot of times it'll just brush right off with your fingers, and it'll leave, a little bit of powder residue, but it's just that ridge coming off. So now we'll pop them in the oven. So after our powder is completely dry and cooled off, the next step is to glue the projectile to the powder cake or cartridge or whatever it is you'd like to call it. Now, I use this arrow fletching glue. It is nitrocellulose lacquer. This is also what John Crossan recommends for this. I just use a little acid brush. Now, I can tell you that it's really easy to overdo it on the glue. Now, for these here, we're using the Arizgon Richmond Laboratories bullet, which I really like as far as 36 caliber conicals go. And so you just give it a little bit of a dab and put that powder cake right on it and hold it. And again, it's easy to overdo it. And if you overdo it, the glue squirts out the side and that makes it harder to load. So it really doesn't take that much. And this stuff dries pretty fast, which is also pretty handy. Now, if anyone is wondering what these press cakes weigh, they consistently come out right about 17.5, anywhere between 17.2 and 17.8 after they're completely dry. Now, this is what got me in trouble with the first batch, but again, I'll get to that in a few. So after your projectiles are glued to your powder cake, the next thing is to waterproof them. Now, this is a very thinned down nitrocellulose lacquer. It is 20-to-1 lacquer to acetone, so it's very, very thin. Now, John recommends 2 coats. I only did 1. I found that 1 did just fine, but if you want to follow the instructions directly, he says 2. Now, luckily, the acetone dries very, very fast, along with the glue that dries fast too. So after a minute, you could even blow on these, and after just a few seconds, they're dry enough to handle. Now, this next part here reminds me of something my mom has always told me when it comes to cooking and baking. And she always says that you never mix your ingredients over the bowl that you're putting all your stuff in, because you could spill something and it'll land in your bowl and mess up your recipe. Looks familiar. So here is the finished product. Now, I did save a few of these and set them aside that are not coated. They have no nitrocellulose coating. The ones here on the bottom are coated. You can see the difference in color there. The one on the left is coated. The one on the right is not. Now, I burned up a bunch of my conicals with the first batch, so that's all the conicals that I have, but I have these here that are press cakes that we're just going to try with a round ball. Dare I say, kind of like a Pyrodex pellet. So this footage here is from my first attempt at making the Hazard compressed cartridges. These are 36s, and as you can see, they load into this 1851 Paetta just fine, just as advertised, and they look great, and they seemed like it was going to function okay. But after we got them loaded up and ran them, we immediately saw that something was really, really wrong. Now, I don't know if you can see it here, but there was a few of these that were so slow. They were in the 3 and 400s, and you could see the powder cake flying down range, smoking and burning, and the velocities were all over the map. Now, I think all of them did go off, but there was something clearly wrong.
625.
Man.
Oh, that was,
every single shot's low.
That was horrible.
355. Well, that felt powerful. 645. Well, that sounded real. 741.
All right.
What?
Telling you, man, something ain't right.
Clearly.
Now, my initial thought was that I had overdone it on the nitrocellulose coating, and that's why they were burning so inconsistent. But I had brought some acetone with me, and I had tried to wipe off as much of the nitrocellulose lacquer as I could, and it didn't make any difference. They were just all over the map. So when I got home, I sent an email to Hugh Knight asking him what he thought the problem was. If you don't know who Hugh Knight is, he's a published author, and he actually wrote this book here, Making Combustible Revolver Cartridges, which I didn't own at the time, because if I did, I probably would have figured it out. But either way, so I sent him an email, explained the situation, and he said that it seemed like my powder charges were still wet, and to pop them in the oven at 140 degrees for 90 minutes or so. And so with the second batch, that's what we did. I also thinned the nitrocellulose lacquer down even more than I did the first batch, and that seemed to cure our irregular burn rate issue.
Junk, dude.
It started off pretty promising. The first shot was 600 and something.
Yeah, you were banging it the first two.
Huh. Why doesn't it work? Well, it works, but why doesn't it work well?
That's a new one, right?
Yeah, I just got it last night. All I did was clean the grease off of it with some acetone and ran 6 caps through it. Still a little on the crunchy side. We'll give it the old Mike Bellevue tune-up, and it'll be great. So here are our Hazard compressed cartridges. We're going to start with the uncoated ones, and these are the Richmond Labs 147 grain bullets. And yeah, Hugh, if you're watching, I know they probably wouldn't have used that bullet during the Civil War, or at least Hazard wouldn't have. So you don't have to give me a lecture.
Yeah. All that historical accuracy stuff.
I'm only mostly kidding. These things cut such a gnarly ring of lead. Look at those. Look at that thing.
Yeah.
Need to save that and melt that stuff down.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got our 1851 Navy loaded up with our Hazard compressed cartridges. These are 18 grains of homemade 4F with the Richmond Labs bullet, and these are not coated. So we'll see how it does. This is also the first shots with this particular revolver. I just got it last night, so we'll see how it does. Hey.
Hey, all right.
928.
There we go. You look high and to the left.
Hold, please.
What, you got a cap jam already?
Yeah, right off the bat.
Wow.
Okay.
All right.
That was 928, in case anybody forgot.
Still high and to the left.
759. $891. $817. Boy, this cap jam's like my pocket navy. $850. Okay, well. $781.
Hey, you know what I noticed that I really like?
What?
No spitting unburnt powder or burning powder.
And that group looks pretty good, except for that last one. So,
I think you got 2 through
shit.
1 hole.
Man, if I didn't yank that last one, that would have been all real good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Okay, so just a tad high and a little to the left, it looks like.
Yeah.
But I would imagine those big old heavy conicals to hit high.
Yeah.
Now we'll get this thing slicked up as good as my 44 cal Navy. It'll be bitching. This one is attractive looking.
It looks good.
The black trigger guard and back strap, that looks good to me.
Yeah.
Over the brass stuff. Okay. So we have our 1851 Navy loaded with our Hazard compressed cartridges, and these ones have been coated. Now the last ones we just tried still had a pretty wide spread, but they seem to be pretty accurate at 15 yards. but I wouldn't expect that big a spread to have accuracy issues this close. If you're shooting at 50 or longer, then probably. Well, let's see how we do with our coated ones. .838. Boy, those cap jams. Man.
I hate them. I hate them so much.
.814.
Nice.
Oh my goodness. Jeez. .861. These seem more consistent to me so far, Derek.
It's good.
No flinch. Oh, you dirty, rotten scoundrel. Big old cap wadded up in there. Jeez. Hang on. Make me look like a dumbass. Worse than usual. $900. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
$809. $846. Okay. Boy, just cap jamming, son of a bitch, man. Okay, so that averaged 845. Still had 100 foot per second spread, but that's not even that bad. We see almost 100 feet per second spread with round balls pretty regularly.
Yeah, we do.
So
Upwards of 80.
Yeah, 75, 80.
Yeah.
But even still, that's the most consistent shit we've had.
With the hazard cartridges.
Yes.
'Cause-
Let's see how it did. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, there's a double in there someplace.
This one, that top left one was already a double. So that bottom
this
right
here?
one is going to be the
Yeah,
second
it looks
double.
like there, so. I might have yanked those two. Getting frustrated with them goddamn cap jams. The second string of our compressed cartridges that are coated. Right?
Yes.
Right. All right. Here it goes. Don't mind the cap jams. $846. $822. Man, terrible. $783. Oh, every shot. Holy cow.
Brand new.
Yeah, I know. That doesn't mean I have to like it.
Oh, yeah, of course not.
$748.
Cap jam.
Yeah. $863. 819. Okay, so that averaged 813. A little bit wider spread that time. Yeah, cap jamming son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Man, I'm telling you, this is me.
Well, yeah, because you're all bitchy and complaining about cap jams. Now, don't get me wrong. I'd be mad too.
My point is, I could do better. like this, where you just pop them in there. See?
You mean like, what's that stuff you hate? It's that stuff everybody hates. Pyrodex? Those pellets?
I was hoping you weren't going to say it, but yeah, I like a Pyrodex pellet.
But, what, slightly less gay?
These are like the OG Pyrodex pellets. We have our 1851 Navy loaded up with our compressed cartridges and a round ball. So we just popped them in there, put a ball on top of it, and kind of used them like a Pyrodex pellet. But don't tell anybody. So here we go. .904. .1006.
Just point it down. That way,
Oh, that way it doesn't jab me in my pocket?
yeah. And if it puts a hole in your pocket, big whoop. Mom's home and just have her fix it.
Poor thing. .933. .1006. .940. Almost made it. .1031. Well, that was plenty consistent, Derek.
What's the spread?
Oh, wait, no, it wasn't. Sorry, I was looking at standard deviation of 46. I'm like, wow, that's great.
That's great.
Spread was 127. That averaged 970, though. God, did I yank that one way down there? Was that me?
Probably.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6.
6. Oh,
Yeah.
that.
Oh.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, it's definitely looks like it's shooting a little bit to the left. But that totally worked.
Yeah.
Overall, this is not unacceptable performance in my book.
Not for pistol range.
Well, yeah, at 15 yards. I mean, if you're going to shoot 50 or 80 yards, you might see a lot more difference with that wider spread like that. But overall, it's a vast improvement from our first try. That's
yeah.
for sure.
Hands down.
Yeah. Yeah, that was scary when it was flying downrange, smoking and burning into the bushes. That wasn't bitching.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
all right.
Let's fix that thing.
Yeah, shit.
That poor Navy needs some help. So after we worked out a couple of the kinks, these things seemed to work pretty damn well. I was a little surprised that it ended up being moisture in the powder cake that was giving us the trouble initially. I made a whole bunch of them over a few days and let them sit even out in the sun. I set them in a pie pan and set them out in the sun for a couple hours. I just figured they'd be pretty dry, but they were not obviously dry enough. So after we talked to Hugh and put our press cakes in the oven for a little while and made sure they were dry, that obviously cured it. As for the amount of nitrocellulose coating,
we didn't see much difference between coated and non-coated. I think the coated ones were just a tad bit faster, not really any cleaner that we could tell. So as long as you're making sure that they are dry enough, they should work okay. I still wasn't too thrilled with the wide spreads, even with the ones that worked well. We still saw spreads of 100 plus feet per second, which isn't intolerable. I would just like to see it closer to maybe 50. For example, using the same 4F powder that these are made out of, homemade 4F, and the same conical in a nitrated paper cartridge, we got pretty much the same power level, maybe a little bit more, but much more consistent velocities from shot to shot. If I had to take a guess, and I am taking a guess, I think it's the 4F and maybe inconsistent compression in those powder charges that gives us the inconsistent velocities. That's my theory. What I'm going to try next is using 3F instead of 4 to see if that doesn't narrow up that spread a little bit. But again, still not unacceptable. As for pros or cons for the Hazard cartridges versus nitrated paper cartridges, these still take more time. Now, they take considerably less time now that we can make them make more than 6 in a 24-hour period, because that was really my biggest problem is you can only make 6 and then you got to let them sit for a day. But we were able to overcome that. But even if you are able to make 48 of them in 2 days worth of time, you still got to let them sit for a while. You still got to put them in the oven, make sure they're dry. Where paper cartridges, you could make up a bunch of tubes, fill them up with powder, glue a conical in there, and you're set. So even though we were able to shorten up the amount of time with these considerably, it still is slower than a paper cartridge. So there's that. Some pros of these would be they seem to be very tough. They do not snap off very easy. I even dropped one on the concrete and it didn't break. They are waterproof if you coat them. John has a video on his channel where he takes some of these, puts them in a pie pan full of water, splashes them around for a minute, and then puts them in his revolver and fires them. You're not going to be able to get away with that stuff with a paper cartridge. Paper cartridges, in my experience, are kind of wimpy, depending on the paper that you're using. Lately, we've been using nitrated coffee filters. Those are more tough than cigarette rolling papers, which is what I used for a long time back when I was a kid for paper cartridges. So these are a lot more tough. They can handle a lot more abuse. I wouldn't be afraid to have these just rolling around in my bag. I think they would probably survive okay while you're out tromping around through the pasture. Not the case with a paper cartridge. So that's a pro. As for overall performance, they shoot well, they go off, they're reasonably powerful, reasonably accurate, and historically accurate, if you're worried about that kind of stuff. As I'm holding up one with a Richmond's Labs bullet, which I don't reckon Hazard would have used, but you get the idea. So as usual, folks, if you thought this video didn't suck, do me a favor and hit the like button and consider subscribing. And if you did think it sucked, go make your own damn video.